Today I heard some terrible news about a young woman who was in a really terrible relationship, left the relationship, but was so broken by the relationship, among other things, that she took her own life. And so the cost of being in a toxic relationship is huge. In fact, it's funny, it's not funny, but it's sad. Before I heard this story, I was driving back, I went to get my nails done. I was driving back from the nail salon and I was thinking to myself that there are some men that help you thrive as a woman, and there's some men that you have to survive as a woman. If you're fortunate, you survive them. And then I got back and I heard this story. And this young woman didn't survive. And she was young, she was like 36. And there's a statistic that says that wife abuse, emotional abuse in relationships accounts for over 50% of suicide attempts in women, in particularly Black women. So it's such an important conversation to discuss toxicity and how women unknowingly get into it. Such an important conversation. The other reason why I want to talk about this is also, and I'm going to do, so if you're not following me, follow me, because I'm going to do another series of reels on how toxic relationships are keeping your past toxic relationships, not even the ones you're in now, could be what is keeping you broke. There are some women that don't even realize that their financial state today is actually tied to some of the relationship trauma that they had in the past. I'm going to do a series of reels about that. I'll talk about that another time. But today, I want to give you context to why this conversation is really important. Some things that I had shared, one of the ones that was most resonant was the very first point. And let me tell you, it was resonant for many women, but I also got some pushback from some men. Y'all calm down, okay? Calm down. I'm going to tell you why I think this is important. So the first thing that I said, the first thing that women do that unknowingly, that positions them for a toxic relationship without knowing it, where you choose, you attract a toxic partner or you co-create a toxic relationship. The first thing is leading with labor versus value. And I kind of want to break that down a bit. I talked about how a lot of women have been conditioned to lead with labor. So let's paint the picture. You're dating, you meet a nice man, you're dating him, right? And then you start trying to lead with labor, and there are different types of labor. The most common is physical labor. So you meet him, you go to his house, you cook up a storm, you're doing the laundry, you're cleaning, you're doing everything because you want him to know you're a wife material, right? This is very common, especially in Nigeria, right? Where I grew up. Can anyone relate to that? You've been taught to do that because you're showing, hey, you're leading with labor, you're leading with physical labor. Another thing that people do, leading with intellectual labor, for example, you might be out on a nice date with a guy, right? And I'll tell you how this actually repels quality men. You might be out on a nice date with a guy and he's telling you about an idea and whatnot, and you're immediately like, oh yeah, you should do this and you should do that, and you want to show him how smart you are, and you're like, yeah, let me do that. In fact, send me that proposal. Let me take a look at it. Before you know it, you're reading all his stuff, you're checking for errors, you're now the executive assistant, you're the secretary, you're the coach, you're the mentor, you're everything, right? And you're still trying to be his woman. You're leading with intellectual labor. Or you might be leading with emotional labor. You are constantly encouraging. You wake up in the morning, first thing on your mind is, I need to encourage him. I need to tell him all the things. He's not giving that back to you, by the way. And he's not even asking for it. You're constantly barraging him with, inspirational messages. Like you're leading with that labor. Or even spiritual labor. You're the one that is like, I'm going to go to the mountain. I'm going to go and fast and pray. He's not doing that. You're the one doing that, right? You're not even married yet. You're doing all of the things. You're leading with labor. You're leading with labor. And so many of us have been conditioned to lead with labor. There's even leading with sexual labor. Are we grown folks up in here, right? Okay. Some people lead with sexual labor. That's when you go into a relationship, you're in a sexual relationship, and it's not about intimacy and connection, because truly when you're in a relationship, sex should be about intimacy and connection. I'm not saying that you won't have technique. Technique has value because it enhances the quality of the experience if there is intimacy and connection. But when there is no intimacy and connection, there's a higher focus on technique. And when you come into the mindset saying, I'm going to put it on him, I'm going to, when I finish with him, that's leading with labor. You're showing your technique is so good, you want to finish him. You're not connecting, you're actually leading with labor. And when you're doing all of those things, when you lead with labor, you attract people who want your labor. You attract people who want you and value you for what you can do, not for who you are. When you lead with value, you attract people who value you for your being versus value you for your doing. So some people lead with financial labor. All he has to do is say he has an idea. You're already ready to send him money. You're ready to, put all those things. What can I do? You're borrowing money on his behalf. It's like the Tinder swindler. Was that the Tinder swindler? Yeah, it could not be me. The Tinder swindler, right? The borrowing money on his behalf, going all out to, again, prove you're leading with labor. Now, someone asked me, so am I saying that you can't do any of these things for a man? Of course not. If you're in a relationship with someone, more than likely you are going to do some of these things. But leading with labor is different from doing these things as in an organic way. Because if I cook, if I feel like cooking, I'm going to cook. You know what I mean? There's an organic way you do it. But when you lead with it, what you're trying to do is signal value through your labor. You're saying, value me because of what I'm doing for you. In fact, if you've ever in a relationship said, after everything I did for you, you were leading with labor. Because you were doing to signal I'm valuable. You weren't doing in an organic way. I gave him this, I did that. All of that was to try and control, sometimes it's control, to try and control the pace of the relationship. And I tell you, it can be devaluing. It can devalue you in a particular type of man's eyes. It certainly attracts people who are users and abusers. It certainly does, to be very honest, right? Because again, if you're doing, they don't even have a chance to decide whether or not they value you for who you are. They just enjoy taking from you. You're training them to take from you. Even if you get into a relationship with this person and you're doing, again, you're training them to take from you and never to give to you. Never to give to you. A lot of women are not centered in the Let's see, can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me now? No, still can't hear me. I wonder what happened. Let me see. Can you hear me now? Aha, okay, very good. So we're back on track. You can't hear me anymore, or you can hear me. We're back on track? Back on track? Okay, awesome. So I was saying how I was talking about labor, leading with labor, and how it can be very challenging. So first, let me rewind a bit. One of the things that when you're leading with labor, you can attract users and abusers, but also you can repel masculine men. You can actually repel a man who wants to lead with masculine, who has good intent actually. Sometimes you can repel because that can be a way that we try to control the pace of the relationship. You want the intimacy and the connection to happen quicker than it needs to, because when someone is leading with value, when your value takes a while to uncover. Value takes a while to uncover. So often we're hustling, we're trying to rush. We don't even realize we're doing this. Don't feel bad if you've done it. Women have been socialized to go through, do all of these things. So there's a way that we have learned to be, but it doesn't actually serve us. I'll tell you some ways that it can repel a very masculine man. I want to explain something. Imagine if you're leading with intellectual labor. Let me paint a picture for you. Remember how I said you could be at dinner with a nice guy, you guys are talking, and he's sharing his ideas for you. You know, oh, I have this idea, I'm going to do this. I have this business I'm trying to build, and he's sharing his ideas. As a masculine, he's sharing his ideas with you. What we can do, if you're leading with feminine, you're listening to his ideas, you're affirming his ideas, you're affirming his thought process, you're affirming him as a human being who is coming up with some ideas. But when you're leading with that labor, that intellectual, you're trying to, we don't even realize we're doing it. A lot of smart women fall into this category. You're immediately like, oh yeah, let me connect you. You should do this. You should do that. This is what, that sounds like that. Da, 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 da. You're telling him all of these things that in your brain, like you're so smart. You're bringing all your brilliance to the table, right? Nothing is wrong. No one's saying that you should downplay your brilliance. But in a setting where you're meeting somebody and they're sharing with you, even in a platonic setting, the power, listening is a very powerful tool. Rather than giving advice, often if advice is not solicited, it's not necessary to give it. Sometimes you can just listen. Just by listening and holding space for him, if he's a man who has a good heart, he's leading with his masculine, he will value that sometimes even more than you just pouring out your ideas. This is how when you lead with labor, you can repel a man who wants to lead. Where a man who just wants to collect from you will just collect. If you're leading with your financial labor, a man who wants to lead, a man who is grounded, a man who is husband material, so to speak, he's actually going to be repelled by you immediately saying, take this money, let me do this. It's like, wait a minute, because that can be kind of emasculating. It can be emasculating. So sometimes you let him do what he's going to do, especially if you're not married yet. Like you're not even in a concrete relationship. When you're married, of course, there's a give and take with money. That's the reality in any relationship. If you've ever been married for any length of time, you are going to, at least for me, I'm not an ornamental feminine woman. I believe that I'm a very feminine woman, but I'm a purposeful feminine woman. So money moves the way it's meant to move in a relationship. It's a non-issue. But when you're not even in a marital relationship and you start acting in that way, you can repel a quality guy and you attract a person who wants to just take from you. So how do you lead with value versus leading with labor? When you lead with value, you are grounded in your values and the value that you bring. The truth of the matter is, a man that is really checking you out to know what kind of woman is she the kind of woman I want to be with, he's looking to see the way you are, your being versus your doing, because doing can be performative. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Let's just make sure you can hear me well. Okay, a lot of times people do, right? They're doing just to, again, perform. Has anyone ever dated a guy, for example, and he cooked for you and he did all the stuff for you, and then when you got into a long-term relationship, he never got into the kitchen because that was performative. A lot of people know how to perform, so that the doing can be performative. A person who is really careful and wise does not look at the performative stuff. That person looks at the being. And so if you're leading with value, you are centered in your being, right? And so if you are someone, instead of trying to say, I'm going to clean your whole house to prove that I'm a good, homemaker, You keep your own house clean, and when he comes over to visit, he sees how you keep a house. He sees how you cook. He sees how you live. He sees your quality by the way that you show up day in, day out, consistently, not by you signaling with your doing, by the way you show up in your being. Because that's authentic, right? It takes more time. But when you're trying to rush it, right, you then are, two things are happening. You're trying to perform, but you're also missing cues because you need to be paying attention to his being and the way he's showing up too. But we tend not to do that. We tend to try and rush it. And I'll tell you the thing about it. Sometimes we're trying to convince people of our value, right? If he doesn't recognize my value, so you try to convince someone of your value. The challenge with trying to convince someone of your value is you run the risk of becoming devalued. I want to give you an example or a story to help you think about this. Imagine somebody who they're only used to dealing with cubic zirconias, or is that how you pronounce it, or glass, cut glass, like cheaper jewelry, and you are a diamond. And you're trying to tell this person who's, they're looking at you and they're like, is this a diamond? I don't know, right? You're trying to say, I'm a diamond. I'm not a CZ, I'm a diamond. And you're trying to get that person to recognize your value. See me, I'm a diamond. Take me home, I'm a diamond. Marry me, I'm a diamond. That person doesn't recognize you're a diamond because they're not used to dealing with diamonds. And so they may take you, the diamond, right? And put you, because someone who understands the value of a diamond, that jeweler, when they're putting the diamond in a ring, they're going to look for a ring of high quality metal, platinum, something along, they're going to put it in quality metal because they understand the value of a diamond. But someone who doesn't understand the value of a diamond, even if you convince them to take it because it's a diamond, they'll take it and they'll put it in some silver-plated brass, some cheap metal, something that doesn't match it. This is what happens to a lot of women. You convince some guy of your worth who never saw the value of it anyway. And then you get there and you're frustrated in life. And you're crying premium tears. And it's not even his fault because he doesn't deal in diamonds. There are times when you don't have to try and convince anyone of your value. And trust me, I'm not here pointing fingers at anybody. I'm sharing with you, these are mistakes that many of us made. And I'm telling you authentically, don't make that mistake. You don't need to convince anyone of your value. Know your value, live your value, keep increasing your value. And lead with that versus your labor. So that was the first thing that I said. That it's not that you don't take care of him from time. If you're dating somebody, you love on them. But it's out of love and not out of trying to prove that you have value. So that's the first thing that I talked about, right? I saw a guy on there. Hello, SC Beats. Thank you. He said, I'm a man and you're so right. Thank you for that affirmation. So second thing I said, a second way that women unknowingly enter into, attract, or co-create toxic relationships are by being unhealed, by being wounded and not doing the work to be healed. And I talked about the different ways women show up when they're wounded. You can be in wounded feminine or you can be in wounded masculine. If you are in wounded feminine, often what happens is you're disempowered, you're in victim mode, you are, almost, you don't have any boundaries, you don't know how to enforce your boundaries, right? So you're kind of almost like a doormat and people can kind of run roughshod over you and you're like, yeah, men suck, they treat me badly, I just keep having terrible relationships because you're in wounded feminine. You have lost your sense of self, you've lost your power, you don't even know you have power anymore, right? That's wounded feminine. And that person is always in a victim state, ready to tell a victim story. Someone has victimized them, they're terrible people, etc., right? And I'll tell you, when you find yourself in this state, please don't think that, I like the term wounded because wounded is a diagnosis. It means you can heal. Because sometimes people just think that's how they are. No. If you are showing up that way, it's because you're wounded. You can heal. Sometimes your past trauma, whether it's trauma from your family of origin, because some of us have been traumatized from our family of origin. Not everybody came from a great family, unfortunately, right? Some people had a lot of toxic family practices, things that happened in their families. They might have been wonderful people, but they had some broken things going on, right? You might have had trauma in your family of origin. You may have had bad relationships in your past and it has caused you to be wounded, but you have not sat down to do the work to heal, because healing does not just automatically happen. Healing happens with intention. It happens with intention. So you have to heal. Or you might be in wounded masculine. A lot of women are in wounded masculine. Wounded masculine, you don't take any prisoners. I'm not here for any nonsense. Who are you? Before he says one thing, you're ready to finish him. You're like, it's like barbed wire. People can't even get to you because you're not even willing. I'm not zero tolerance. You're that, how people say, I'm that, like I'm that bitch. That's that energy. It's wounded masculine energy. It's very aggressive, very confrontational. And sometimes wounded masculine energy even shows up in just being sexually aggressive, right? You use men for sex. You use men for money. You use men for whatever it is. You're not interested in any connection because you're wounded. You're wounded. And I'll tell you, sometimes when you're in wounded feminine, you tend to attract users and abusers. Right? Because you'll attract somebody who wants to, who reflects that back to you and who's going to dominate and abuse you. But you can also attract those kinds of people in wounded masculine. You may attract someone who is going to use you the same way, because I tell you, men know when they're being used too. So as you're using them, they're using you, right? Number one. But you can also attract someone who wants to dominate you, who is like, oh, I know the kind of woman that is. I'm going to get in there and I'm going to tame the shrew. Do you guys remember the old Shakespearean tale, Taming the Shrew? Right? There is that there, like that. There are men that have that energy, right? So you will end up attracting someone who is a negative partner, a partner in your woundedness, because they are also reflecting back your wound. They also have wounds. So if you don't heal, it's going to be challenging for you to be able to meet somebody who is healed, right? Now, this doesn't mean that you have to be fully healed, but at least you should be on your healing journey. You should have an intention to heal. I don't even believe that there's anything as fully healed, to be honest. I think that healing is a continuum. You're continuously healing, continuously working towards your healing. And so when I talk about toxic people are people who are wounded, who don't want to heal, who are not ready to heal, who don't want to do the work to heal, who don't believe they need healing. They're living in their woundedness, and it has become a toxic thing because they're now projecting their woundedness out onto others. So that was the second thing. The third thing, right, I didn't post this on Instagram. I think I posted it on TikTok, was that some of us, the way a lot of women get into these toxic relationships is... Some of us think that we're like the assistant Holy Spirit. Or if you don't believe in God, maybe you're an armchair psychologist. You have diagnosed him. You know what his wounding is. You know his problems. And you just feel like you can help him heal. My love can heal him. My love can heal him. So you have that idea that I can heal him somehow. If he just knows how much I love him, I can pray him through, I can love him through it. And you're really believing you can change him. Because often toxic people will tell you they're toxic. They will tell you. They will tell you, well, I'm difficult. I have my issues. I can be hard to love. They tell you, let's be real, right? How many of you have been in a relationship where the person told you at the beginning some of the challenges? They told you straight up. They told you, I have this issue, I have these issues, but and you hear it, especially women, and we think we can love them through it. And we have been conditioned to believe this. I want you to think about all the Disney movies that you watched when you were growing up. I don't know if it's Disney, but yes, like Beauty and the Beast, right? He's aggressive, he's violent, and her love heals him, right? Think about Tangled. He's a layabout. Right? He's a thief, and her love heals him, right? Princess and the Frog, her love heals him. We have this idea, and it can go the other way around, right? The Sleeping Beauty, the prince kisses her and she awakens from her slumber. This concept that if we love someone enough, we can heal them, we can change them. The only person The only personality for me as a believer that can change a person by their love is Jesus Christ. And it took his life. And even then, the person has to accept Christ. If you don't accept them, nothing's going to change. You cannot. You're not Jesus. You're not even a professional. You're just a human being. You cannot change people. The only time you can change a person is when they're in diapers. And even then it stinks. You can't change them. They have to want to change. And then there's this idea that people change. If he loves me enough, he will change for me. Can we please stop saying that? Because two things happen. One, people feel guilty. They feel bad as if, oh, he didn't love me enough or she didn't love me enough and that's why she couldn't change. People don't change for other people. They change for themselves. They change for themselves. It doesn't matter whether they were in a relationship with you or not. They changed for themselves. You might have been a catalyst in that I didn't want to lose you or I didn't want, whatever it is, they change for themselves. They don't change for anybody else. I've done a lot of changing in my life. I change for me. When I'm saying I'm going to the gym, right? This morning I went to the gym. I went to spin class. I posted in my stories. I almost threw up. It was so hard. And I'm in that class and I'm like, oh my God. Right? I would not be in that class for any human being except myself because it matters to me. I'm not doing it for anybody else. You have to, and even if you're going to change for anybody, it's usually not a romantic, maybe your children, just to stay alive for them. People don't change for other people. So you can't change a person, no matter how much you love them, no matter how much you pray. And there have been some spiritual leaders who have manipulated people to believe, I've experienced that myself, that, oh, you're the one that knows God, so you just keep praying, hold on, listen. There are some times when it's dangerous to be there. I said at the beginning of the broadcast that emotional abuse in relationships, in particular they call it wife abuse, is one of the leading causes of suicide among Black women in particular. So it's really important that we stop normalizing toxicity in relationships. It is extremely damaging. Just because some people come out of a toxic relationship doesn't mean they come out whole. And some people don't survive it. So we need to be really clear that a toxic relationship should not be a rite of passage. It should not be something that you're like, oh, I'll just go in and come out. I'll tell you categorically, divorce is nothing to play with. It's hard. It's difficult. It's really, really, no matter, even if you're the one that has initiated it, it is challenging. Even if you're empowered, it is challenging. So you need to open your eyes, do your work so that you don't get into one of these situations. It's really, really challenging. So you can't heal him. You're responsible for your own healing. And he is responsible for his own healing. If he says, I know, let me give you an example. If you are in a relationship, something has happened, there's been an issue. He treated you a certain way, he behaved a certain way that a red flag has gone up. And your insides, everything in your body, because your intuition is saying, come on, get out. Like, you're feeling it. You're feeling that way. Anyone been there? And the person now knows. And he's saying to you, I know, I'm working on it. I know what's wrong with me. I went through this. And a lot of women have deep, very empathetic, deep empathy. I had this kind of childhood. He had this kind of childhood. He had this kind of experience. This is why he is the way he is. You can have empathy and understanding for him while still making your way out of that situation. You don't have to set yourself on fire to try and keep him warm. It's not possible. You cannot take Tylenol for his own headache. He's the only one that can heal himself. And so if he knows he needs healing and if he genuinely loves you, he's going to say, you know what? I don't want to keep hurting you in my healing process. I'm going to step back and take care of myself. I want you to really think about this. If you are sick, let's say we're still dealing with COVID. If you have COVID and someone you love comes into the room, are you going to say, oh, I have COVID, come let me hug you, I have COVID. No, you're going to say, please, let me stay in the room by myself. I don't want you to catch it while I heal. That's what that should look like, emotional healing. But so often we think that we can heal for them. You can't heal for them. You cannot. The only thing is to really do your own work while he does his own work. And I'll tell you, if you are someone who tries to heal for them, if you are someone who tries to take on their emotional work, there's a little codependency there, which is a huge signal that you yourself need to do your own inner work and you have some healing to do. Two final pieces. Number 4. Someone says, what Sabrina did that to, I don't know, is that Idris Elba? I don't know their story. But I'll say this, you never know the specifics of people's relationships. So be careful looking from the outside and saying, oh, that's the way I'm going to go about it. You never know the specifics of anyone's relationship. And even if there's an exception to a rule, because there have been people who said she healed me and et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, there are exceptions to every rule, but I'll tell you, rules exist for a reason. I personally, there are people who never wore a mask, never got vaccinated, never got anything, never got COVID. I personally would not walk into a room full of people with COVID saying, oh, the exceptions to every rule. Fine. So it's really up to you, but I'm just sharing with you some of the things that over the years that I've been coaching women for a decade, I've been working with women for 2 decades. So I just want to, share some things. And I myself, I'm a femme du certain âge, a woman of a certain age who has lived a life. So I'm just trying to tell you. The 4th reason why women sometimes get into difficult relationships. Now, Mrs. Owashika was on, and we kind of talked about this for a second, where she did say she wouldn't say, right? But I'm going to say this, me personally. She said, to each his own. And I agree, to each his own, whatever you want. Because there's some women who really believe that being a feminine woman really means being pretty and passive and letting someone else do all the heavy lifting. And when I say heavy lifting, I mean heavy lifting financially, heavy lifting in all of these other areas. And what I call that is a woman who believes her femininity is ornamental. You become like an ornament, like a trophy, right? I understand that, again, everyone has a right. I agree with that. Everyone has a right to live the way they want to live. But I will say this, as a woman who's knocking on 50 and who has worked with a lot of women, I have worked personally with a lot of women, especially at a certain age. I have worked with a number of trophy wives type of women who come from very wealthy backgrounds, married very wealthy men. I will tell you, you are putting yourself at risk. Tell you why. When you create an ornamental version of your femininity, that especially is largely, because when you say my femininity is ornamental, you're offering a couple of things. Your aesthetics and maybe your elegance, so to speak. Maybe, right? You're offering those things, and maybe your sexuality, maybe. All of those things can be found elsewhere, let me just tell you. Beauty is fleeting. It's fleeting. That's why no matter how much plastic surgery you get, it is fleeting. You will age. You will age. And even if you maintain exactly the same face body for the rest of your life, there's something that in Nigeria they call it see finish. Have you ever experienced this? That a man will see you, think you're the most beautiful thing he has ever seen when he first meets you. Give him 3 months. He's been seeing you every day. You're no longer as exotic and amazing to him. It's just reality. You become a bit run of the mill because now he has you. So if you allow yourself to only be valued based on your aesthetics, you are really setting yourself up, because that's why people get traded in for a younger version. You're setting yourself to fail. If you say someone should put you up on a pedestal like a trophy, people fall off pedestals. You're setting yourself up to fail. You're setting yourself up to fail. The second reason why I don't recommend this path at all, honestly, is because there's 4 seasons of womanhood. And I teach this in my womanhood course. There's the girl season. There's a maiden season, girl, maiden, right? Maiden season. And then there is the mother season. And then there is the wild woman season. And there's the wise woman season. When you are in the maiden season, and think about it, in your youth, most, the way we value youth in this country, in this world, really, everything is perky. Okay, everything is standing. Everything is. If I had my 16-year-old waist right now, there will be trouble. All right. So everything, you're young, right? So your aesthetics, you look young and fresh, right? And that's that time. If you make that decision at that time, okay. When you become a mother, things start to change. And not only do things start to change physically, things start to change mentally and spiritually for you. Mentally and spiritually, things start to change in you, because now you're seeing something has come through you. You have experienced the first bit of purpose. Even if you didn't birth a child, when you enter into the mother season, you're nurturing and you're mothering, whether you're mothering your own children, you're mothering other people's children, or you're mothering in a way in the world. You're nurturing, you're in a nurturing season. You begin to see yourself as a value add, right? You start to feel something stirring. I believe every human being was created for purpose. Women are no exception. So something starts to happen in you. There's a shift. Now, you may not do anything with it. A lot of women don't do anything with that in the mother season. But when they get to the wild woman season, this is why you see a lot of divorces in the 40s, because a lot of women get into their wild woman season in the 40s. And men, don't be afraid of the word wild woman. It doesn't mean that they're wild and, oh my God, no. It just means that the way you felt, because a lot of times motherhood feels restrictive because you cannot do anything. If you've ever been a mother, you know that you have to think about your children before you do anything. You have to think about where they're going to stay, where they're going to, like, your life is really centered around mothering. But when you're in the wild woman season, very often your children are grown, right? So women start getting into that place when the children need them less. And they start to feel a call, a hunger, a desire in them for more. I don't know can anyone relate to this? Like, there's got to be more to life than this. They start to feel dissatisfied. They start to feel like something doesn't feel right. They feel unfulfilled. And the person they're with is like, what's the problem? And sometimes people think it's because of the man that they're with, like, oh, because he's so boring. It's not about him, really. It's really about you. There's something happening inside of you. It's a call to purpose. I believe, I call it the call of the icon. It's the call to purpose. A lot of the women I work with, they come to me at that season, and it's because they're desiring to rise from success to significance. They're desiring something inside. Every single one of us has that mandate to arise and shine, for our light has come. There is a mandate inside of us that starts to rise up. But when we don't understand that, we start to mistake it for, that's when you start to see issues in the relationship. Right? Sometimes. I'm not talking about deal breakers where there's the man, the foundation was broken to begin with. I'm talking about relationships that are fine, that are healthy, right? Sometimes you start to see that you just feel constricted. Is that there's a desire to be fully expressed that starts to come out. And if you have tied yourself to a relationship, if you remember what Mr. Wishka said, she said you should be with somebody who can expand to make room for your ambitions. But if you have tied yourself to a man who wants a trophy wife, which means I don't want a woman who's fully expressed. I don't want a woman who has an opinion. I just want a woman who's going to be pretty, who's going to do what I say, who's going to be there for me, who's going to meet all my needs, who's going to be an extension of me. I'm not interested in her being her whole self. She has to be an extension of me. If you tie yourself to that kind of person, when you are in your maiden season or even in your mother season, when you get into that wild season, you'll be deeply unhappy. And sometimes those relationships break because that man cannot expand. When I think about the best types of relationships, the best metaphor, and I said this at my sister's wedding, and it literally came to me because she put me on the spot. She didn't tell me I was going to speak at her wedding. It came to me, was a divine download. The best metaphor is a hot air balloon. Has anyone ever been in a hot air balloon? If you've ever been in a hot air balloon, I really believe it is a wonderful metaphor for a relationship between the feminine and the masculine. The masculine is like the covering. If you've ever been, you'll see that a hot air balloon has a covering, the balloon material. It's a covering. It is powerful. It is strong, because it has to be strong, because you're going up and it's facing the winds and the currents, right? It covers, right? And it's flexible though. It can grow, it can expand. And the feminine part is like the heat, the fire on the inside, the fire. So the way the hot air balloons work is there's cold air in the balloon. The fire, the heat, right? The heat heats up the air, and the balloon expands to hold the air, and it rises. In a good relationship, the masculine can expand to hold space for the feminine as she's expanding too. And they both expand together. But if you have connected with an unhealthy, toxic masculine, he's going to try and quench, squash, suppress. And guess what happens when the balloon suppresses? What a lot of men don't realize, and that's that fear. This is why I say it's a trick of the enemy for a man to be confused, to limit his woman, because God has given that woman an opening opportunities for you too. But when you try to limit her, both of you crash to the ground, because the balloon cannot stay up on its own. It's a two-way street. So if you are ornamental, and then you choose a man who wants an ornament, then when you start to expand, he won't be able to make room for you. He won't be able to make room for you. And so it's very important to have that awareness that what you feel in your maiden season, you're not going to feel that way in your wild season. Many women, and I'll tell you some of the toxic ways that desire becomes expressed. It happens to men too. They have their own seasons of manhood, but I don't teach on manhood. So I'm not teaching you guys that. I teach on womanhood. So I teach on the seasons of womanhood. But some of the toxic ways it can be expressed. If you're a woman who never cheated before, for example, you are faithful, you were never ever cheating, you don't have an issue with sexual indiscipline, because that's a separate thing. Sometimes in the wild woman phase, if you have not, because that thing comes, it's strong, it's a desire, like I need to be expressed, I need some excitement. That's what people say. I feel unfulfilled, I feel unsure. That's when you can be tempted to get into an illicit relationship, because you're looking for excitement. But that excitement that you're looking for is something that can only be filled by divine purpose. So you will never find it. A lot of men too get stuck in this, right? They're looking for, there's a call to purpose on their lives too, but they can't find it. You know, you can't find it inside of anybody's vagina. Okay. Did I say that? I said that. Neither can you find it with, you know, no matter how fine he is, you can't. So you have to be able to recognize what the call is. So that's one of the other ways. Then the last thing I'm going to say, which is related to this. Another way women get into toxic relationships, and I'll say this is really, really key, is by being unwilling to invest in themselves and increase their value. I'll tell you, I've met men, remember the analogy I gave about the hot air balloon? I've met men who are expansive. They just want their woman to rise, right? And they were with her through the maiden season. They love her, like, oh, but they can see who she can be. They love her through the mother season, but they're waiting, come on, right? And then so many of us women have gotten conditioned to see ourselves as so small, and we're unwilling to try, unwilling to rise, right? And so in a good relationship, it can cause chaos, it can cause problems. He can start to feel disconnected and bored, and why won't you're not in alignment. You can get out of alignment in that way. But if you're dating, let me tell you how this looks when you're dating, right? You are settling for your own self. You're not holding yourself to your own standards. You know you can have more. You know you can be more. There's a call to greatness in your life. You know you can rise. You know that if you discipline yourself, you can get to this. You know that if you manage yourself, you know that if you invest in yourself, let me invest in my mind. Let me invest in my purpose. Let me invest. There's something, you know, but you're just unwilling. So many women have been conditioned to invest on themselves and not in themselves. You will spend a premium on your hair, your clothes, everything. I like to look good. Look good. I'm not saying don't look good. But what you're spending on your outside should be a fraction of what you spend on your inside. This is real talk, because it is your insides, your mind, your spirit, your soul that really will determine the quality of your life. It's not how you look on the outside. It is your inside. For that matter, let me break it down even further. There are women, I've seen women who spend a ton of money on their outsides. And you see some woman come into the room and she's wearing an outfit from Walmart. I guess, what's the UK version of that? Primark, something cheap, right? But one, her body is together, because that's also investing in yourself, right? Or her mind, when she walks into the room, she's so well, she's done her inner work, so she has presence. If you don't know what presence is, you know, when a woman walks into the room that has presence, you're like, who is she? Presence. And you have spent your money on your designer outfit, your hair, everything, and you cannot command the room the way that woman who has done her inner work, who is grounded in her womanhood, who knows her value, when she walks into the room, she is captivating. When she has a conversation with the man, she may not even be his quote-unquote type, but there's a way that she speaks. There's a way she shows up. He cannot help. Like, she's magnetic. Trust me, I know. And it doesn't matter how old you are. I have some gray hairs. I've tested it multiple times. So I'm telling you, the inner work, if you don't invest in yourself, if you settle for less from yourself, then expect life to give you less, even when it looks like more. Expect life to give you less, even when it looks like more. There are so many women that settle for less. Today I posted in my stories, I don't know this person, I guess he's some sort of internet guru. And he said something that I believe is a lie from the pit of hell. So I want to debunk it right now. He said that men are more likely to marry an unemployed woman, basically a woman who's financially disempowered. So he was saying that women should really be financially disempowered if they want to be married. That was what he was actually saying. And I wrote on my page, if you go to my stories, you'll read what I wrote. I said, he missed a word. He said men, and I said, no, he missed a word. What he needed to say was weak men. There's a difference between a man who I would call a king and a weak man. It's a weak man that wants a disempowered woman. A king is looking for an ally. A king understands that he needs an ally. Where have you seen where kings go and look? They look for queens because they need powerful allies. It is only a weak man that says, I want a woman who's weak and disempowered so I can dominate her. You should run from any man that suggests that. Any man that suggests that all he has to offer you is money. Money is cheap. I know that it doesn't seem cheap, but trust me, you will discover that money is the cheapest thing you can lay your hands on. Money is cheap. Talk to me about fidelity. Talk to me about time. Talk to me about affection. Talk to me about integrity, and you will discover that money is the cheapest thing. You can make money. But character, that's not easy to come by. And so a weak man wants a disempowered woman because that way he can always use money to control her. So when you decide to become disempowered, when you decide, I don't know my purpose and I don't want to focus on my purpose, I just want to marry, I just want man, you are putting yourself in a dangerous position. If you are disempowered in any way, I highly suggest, take the time, and I'm telling you straight talk, take the time. Sometimes you need to take yourself off the market. If all you're getting is bad offers, take yourself off the market. And say, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to elevate my value. I'm going to elevate my value intellectually. You guys know that, you may or may not know, but expect me to share a lot of father stories because my father passed away earlier this year. And let me tell you, I've been sitting with just the things that he shared with me. And I'll tell you one day, can I tell you guys a story? My dad was a straight shooter. And he was a straight shooter. He would tell me some serious things. I remember back then, I was married at the time, and I had my daughter, and she was like a year or two old. My dad, when we were growing up, he would read stories of Greek mythology to us. My dad is a thinker. He's a philosopher. He was a philosopher. He was a thinker. He's known for his intellectual capacity, right? He was a brilliant man. And he would often, and he valued brilliance in his children. And for me, I would often sit with him and talk and grow, and we would just share thoughts and ideas. When he came to visit me, my daughter, I don't know how old she was still very, very young, probably either in preschool, or she was still very young. So I was getting steeped into the mother phase, right? And I was working as a pharmacist at the time. So literally, I would come back from work drained. I did not enjoy working as a pharmacist. I know that being a pharmacist is noble work. So for those people who are doing it and love it, awesome for you. It was not for me. It was killing my soul. I hated it. I really didn't enjoy it. So I would come back from work drained, and then I would go right into mother role, and I'm with my baby and just sort of talking to the, and so my dad would try to engage me in conversation about, current events, ideas, the kinds of things he talked about. And I would be like, I had nothing to offer. And I remember one day he said, come. He sat me down and he said, can I come home? Listen, let me tell you something. You are becoming intellectually lacking. You are boring. You're not adding anything to the conversations these days. What is going on? Listen, you better get it together. And he told me categorically, he said, otherwise, because I'm bored talking to you and I'm your father, you're going to bore anyone around you, especially your husband. Get it together. I remember when he said that, and I was like, that's rather harsh. I went to my room and I was sobered. At first I was annoyed. Of course, who likes to get criticism? But I sat with it and I said, he's telling the truth. I need to get my act together. And so he gave me homework. He's like, what book are you reading? What are we discussing? Literally, I remember he would check on me like, okay, have you read this? What are we discussing? Because he was like, you are a bright intellectual woman. What are you doing to yourself? And this is what happens to a lot of women. You kind of just drop out of life. You drop out of your abilities. You have all these great abilities. You're bright, you're sophisticated, you're intellectual, and then you just start dumbing down. When you dumb down, you will attract dumbing down. But when you rise up, let me point something else out. I remember listening to an interview with Ciara and Russell Wilson. You guys know who they are, right? They're always being talked about, especially because Ciara used to date Future. Oh, there was another point I made that I hadn't made here. And I'll use that. I'll use them as this point. She used to date a guy called Future. I don't really know. I understand I think he's a rapper. I don't know his music. And from what I understand about him, he has had multiple children by multiple women. He's maybe a bit sexually indiscriminate. Let me just put it that way, right? And so I think their relationship ended maybe because of cheating or something along those lines. So she left Future. And now she's with Russell Wilson, who is the polar opposite. He is a man of faith. He is a very organized man. He values he's a family-oriented man. He is very, very successful as well. I think financially more successful, perhaps, right? But he carries himself very differently. Very, very differently. Very differently. In fact, there are many men who are like, there's some men who are like, yeah, Russell Wilson is my kind of guy. And then there's some who is like, oh, he's a square or whatever nonsense they're saying. Like the Future type guys, that Future is cool, right? And then Russell is a square. Me, I'm an older woman. I'll just tell you. If I hear a man talking about, I'm cool, I'm done, I don't even have anything more to say to you. Go and be cool elsewhere. I'm not looking for a guy that's cool. Who has time for that? I'm looking for a grown-up man. I'm just saying my own point of view, right? But people talked about them. They talk about them all the time. And so let me use this as an example for one of the things I said about toxic relationships. Sometimes Ciara was able to, when you look at it, like people were like, oh, she's only with Russell for his money or whatever nonsense they're saying. Ciara is a very successful woman herself. She's clearly not with him just for the money. That's nonsense, right? What they cannot reconcile the fact that she has changed what she desires, because they're so different. And this is what I said a lot of times we don't realize we need to do. We need to change our palette. your palate is what you have a taste for. And your palate is created by what you're used to having, what you've been experiencing. So if you have been used to eating spicy food, you will have a taste for it. If you've been eating bland food, that's what you're used to. So when you now are introduced to spicy food, you're going to be like, no, thank you, I don't like it, and vice versa, because you have a palate. However, a palate can be changed. I know this for a fact because when I started trying to be healthier, I had to change my palate. Initially, I would eat salads. No, I never used to eat salads. I would eat what we call in Nigeria salad, which if you are eating salad and trying to lose weight, let me help you. Let me give you a little sidebar. That is not going to help you because that salad that you're eating in Nigeria with baked beans, with tuna, with everything, you might as well eat jollof rice. It is not a low-calorie meal in the least. It is salad. It sounds heavy. It is heavy. So I didn't used to eat salads. When I started wanting to change my life physically, from a health perspective, I had to change my palate. It took a while before I started enjoying green smoothies. It took a while before I started enjoying salads. In fact, today I had a salad. The only thing I had in the house to make it was literally spring mix and basil and some lemon juice and black pepper. I wouldn't have been able to enjoy that before, but I was able to enjoy it today because my palate has changed. For some of you, you have to change your palate. Like you've been used to, I want boys, bad boys, cool boy, whatever, just attracted to, and that boy those kinds of men keep dealing with you. You have to change your palate. Like, you know what? I'm changing my palate. I don't want to taste this kind again. I want this kind of Russell type. Give me a square. I'm tired of the cool boys. Let me do my inner work. Let me figure out why I had that palate in the first place. Right? And now let me start understanding. Because you cannot just swing from one to the other. Because what happens when women do that, and please don't do this, because I wrote somewhere one day that if you haven't done your inner work, stop praying for a king, because God loves his sons too. There are some women that when they get with a good guy, they're so hungry for the kinds of bad behaviors they're used to that they start demoralizing, devaluing this man, talking down to him. Imagine if it was Ciara that kept calling him a square. It's one thing for the people outside, but there's a video I saw where he walked in with flowers for her, and he walked in to surprise her, and the way she jumped on him, kissed on him, loved on him, you could tell she loves her husband. She values her husband. She makes him feel appreciated. But when a woman has not done her inner work and you just say, I'm tired of being treated like crap by these types of guys, and so I'm just going to go over here to these types of guys, but deep down inside you have not changed your palate. You still desire these types of guys, and you go over here, you now frustrate the poor man, and you can cause toxicity. You devalue him, you talk down to him, you cheat on him, you treat him badly, and then now you have another man who's now saying, women are this, women are that. There's so much wounding in our community. Literally, we all need to take a break and heal at this point. Everybody go heal. Everybody go heal, right? We need to heal. And so it's so important to change your palate. So getting back to the last, I wanted to get to the last point because I've been talking longer than intended. Last point. And I was bringing up Russell and Ciara for this because there was a video where everyone always asked Ciara, what prayer did she pray to get a man like Russell? And he says, so the interviewer was interviewing both of them. And of course, she asked Ciara that question again. We just want to know the prayer you prayed to get a man like Russell. And Russell interjects, he interrupts, and he says, you know what? Everyone always asks her that question, but no one ever asks me what prayer I prayed to get a woman like her. First of all, okay, talk about a green flag. He says, no one ever asks me. A lot of men would just sit there and bask in the glory of being the desired one. But he wanted to make a point that it's not just my wife that got lucky with me. It is me that got lucky with my wife too. Talk about that. And he said, I want you to, I still remember what he said. He talked about, some of the good qualities, of course, that you would expect. But there's one thing that he said that I caught on to. He said, and I caught on to it because I've counseled and coached so many women in this space. He said, I wanted a woman who was at the top of her game and who could walk into a room, and when she walked into the room, she tilted the room. Like he wanted a powerhouse. He said, that's what I wanted. I wanted a woman who owned the room, who could tilt the room is the term he used. And I love that because I want you to understand something. There are many men that's what they desire. In fact, many high quality men, that is what they desire. I know there's this narrative that's being pushed out here that high quality men, they feel as if they have nothing to offer you if you have everything going on, blah, blah, blah. I don't know about what they're calling high value men, 6-figure. I don't know that. I know men of purpose, men who have a calling upon their lives. I've had many conversations with men who are what I would consider men of purpose, high quality, the husband material type thing, right? Quality men. These men have a purpose upon their lives, and they believe that the woman that they're with should have a purpose as well. And of course, they want her to live and be self-actualized, of course. But if a man doesn't see a woman as an equal, of course, he's not going to want to see her self-actualized. Just pay attention to that. Some men see women, some men have a benevolent sexism. Be careful. So a man that really sees you as the same way God created me, he created you, a purpose partner, he's going to want you to be your best. And so many women are saying, why can't I find good men? And this is another, let me give you a metaphor or an analogy. I think analogy is the proper term. Imagine there's a mountain, right? And the man that you're desiring, the kind of man you're desiring, he's a man of purpose and he's climbing the mountain. He's climbing up the mountain. You're over here on this side of the mountain. But because you have been taught that men are intimidated, you've been taught, oh, men don't want this or men don't want that. Or maybe you don't want to do the work, right? You don't want to invest in yourself. You just kind of you're looking for someone to save you or whatever the case is. You're hanging out at this level of the mountain. He's over here. You're here. He can't even find you. He's looking, right? But you haven't risen. I don't mean level as in money. I mean level as in purpose, as in being purposeful and doing your best work. Because you could be in a nonprofit position. It's not about money. It's about being purposeful, being intentional and purposeful, answering the call of God upon your life. And he's doing everything because it has nothing. It's not money. You can have a lot of money and not be purposeful. And you can have no money and be purposeful. But you're not rising. You're not rising. And then you're wondering, where is he? Sometimes the reason why you haven't found him or haven't been found by him is because you haven't risen to where you need to be for him to find you. Sometimes that's what's necessary. You have to get into the palace, so to speak, right? And so that's one way. So what happens when a woman is here, she starts choosing from who's choosing her around here. And then she starts saying, there are no quality men. The men these days are this, that. Because you're not choosing the kind of men that climb the mountain to get up here. You're choosing from men who are also not trying to go up any mountains. Because there are just as many men who are not trying to do it as many women. So it's for you to decide, who am I? What am I here for? Right? To do your work. Do I need healing? Do I need to grow? Do I need to invest in myself? If you feel as if you've been having toxic relationship after toxic relationship, please stop engaging consistently in talk, because it changes you. Every time you have an abusive relationship or talk, it changes your brain, it changes your self-image, it changes your sense of self-worth. Even if you say it doesn't, it does. Sometimes it's worth it to pull back and say, you know what? Let me take care of myself for a bit. Let me do a little inner work. Let me understand what's going on with me and let me transform. I posted on my stories a little while ago because I have a program called the Iconic Womanhood Course, right? I have to tell you about it, right? I even took out a bundle called Relationship Prep, but I have a program called the Iconic Womanhood Course. A woman had taken the course. She posted on my thing. She'd taken the course. I think when she entered the course, she was coming out of a toxic relationship. And when she finished the course, right? People take the course. I don't know everybody's story unless people tell me, right? So she came and she said to me, she met a great guy. Before that, it was as if it was only toxic guys. But when she did the inner work, because the course will take you through to understand your programming. Sometimes you're attracted to a certain type of man, not because that is your natural, you don't even know. It's just what you've been trained to be attracted to. Sometimes it's your trauma that's attracted to that man, the up and down nature of him. So many of us don't even know how much we've been programmed. You've been reading Mills and Booms and Harlequin romances your whole life, and the whole time you've been reading about dark, brooding men who are cruel. Because if you read those romance novels, they're often cruel in the beginning. They're rude, they're emotionally unavailable, and then somehow, he becomes wonderful. And you don't know that that's programming you. That's what you've learned to be attracted to. That's what you've learned. So when you meet a man who treats you nicely, immediately, a man who speaks to you, a man who is emotionally intelligent, you don't know what to do with it because you've been trained through all of these different things to look for dark, brooding. That's what you don't even realize all that stuff is programming our minds. It's programming you. But when you get into the course, it helps you unpack it. Some of us have self-sabotaging beliefs. You've only seen toxic relationships. You don't know that you have a self-sabotaging, you don't know that you have a hidden belief that all relationships are bad. You actually don't know. Your parents' relationship was bad, your cousins, the people around you. You keep talking about bad relationships. Anytime you see one, you highlight it. So that's a hidden belief that you have at the subconscious level. Whatever you believe, you will make true. So you go find somebody to prove that, whether you know it or not. You pick somebody who is in alignment with that belief. And when it blows up again, you say, I said it. Men are scum. Men are not scum. Some men are scum. Some women are. And I don't even like the term scum because it makes it seem as if people cannot change. I wholeheartedly believe in the power and possibility of a person to change. I know that change is difficult. I know it is hard work. So I don't believe in you waiting around for someone to change. I believe you let go and let God do what he's going to do in their lives. And you get out the way and you go do your own work. So I hope this has been helpful for you. I want to encourage you to go to my website, iconicwomanhood.com. Click on the course. Click on the course. If you want a lifetime of joy, abundance, love, and you are not willing to even invest in yourself a little bit, you're playing yourself. You don't have to take my course. You really don't. But it's good. It's a good course. I wouldn't say it otherwise. And I encourage you to go check it out. I also have created a relationship prep bundle. Some of you have already done a lot of inner work, but you have not learned how to position yourself in a desirable way. You have not learned how to position yourself and recognize the quality of man that you need. You haven't learned those things. So I pulled out some of the relationship pieces from the course, feminine and masculine energy. I get a lot of questions about that. How to be a highly desirable woman. Not every woman has to have long hair and this, that. Sometimes there's some women, depending on your style and your natural tendency, that won't even look good on you. You have to learn how to be your most desirable self that is authentic to you. There's a class called the Highly Desirable Woman Masterclass. There's the Sensuality Masterclass. Yes, sensuality. Sexuality is part of it. I don't teach on sexuality. I usually bring in a vendor to do that. That's the truth. At our workshops, I've brought in several vendors before to teach on many things. Yes, some classes we've had to hold a banana. I'm just telling you the truth. You need to learn everything, right? But in my course, I teach on sensuality. There's so many women that don't know how to be sensual. And it's going to be very difficult to have a whole, happy, rich relationship long-term if you are disconnected from your sensuality. And a lot of us have been. I was for a very, very long time. So there's a sensuality piece on there. There's a passion piece on there. So All of that, the relationship prep bundle is actually pulled from the Iconic Womanhood course, which is more robust. That's 12 master classes. The relationship prep, I think, is 4 classes or 4 or 5 classes. So if you want to just do the relationship, I know how people like to do, go ahead, click on the link in my bio. You'll be able to get the relationship prep bundle. But if you're ready to go for the full, what do they call it? The full, no, is it full Monty? Don't let me say the wrong thing. If you want the whole thing, the full entree, the full course meal, if you want to do the self-mastery work, you want to do the healing, you want to reclaim your voice, you want to learn how to live a magnetic lifestyle, how to have powerful presence, then you want the full course, which is the Iconic Womanhood course. And all you have to do is go to iconicwomanhood.com, hit the course, or go to iconicwomanhood.com/new. So I hope this has had value for you. I believe that it has, because you've stuck around this long. Thank you so much.